You're listening to Speak Up and Stay Alive, Patient Safety Radio, and I am your hostess, Pat Rulo, always in search of a topic that will be useful to you as you navigate through your health encounters. And today's topic and guest fit that bill. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is Julie Stiles, a health and transformation coach and theta healing practitioner. She is a graduate of the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and has an MA in Consciousness Studies from John F. Kennedy University. Julie brings a unique blend of skill and expertise to her work. Her commitment to changing the way illness and health are viewed in this country is reflected in all aspects of what she does, including her newest endeavor, the podcast Autoimmune Adventures. And I am happy to share the air with her today. So welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you so much, Pat. It's great to be here. Thanks for that warm welcome.
Well, you are always welcome. So we find from my introduction that you are a coach and a healing practitioner and that you host a podcast called Autoimmune Adventures. And I'd like to focus on autoimmune diseases today. And I know that you have a health journey surrounding this topic, and I'm hoping that you will share a bit of that with us today. But before we go there, explain exactly what is an autoimmune disease. People might think it might mean that their car is sick. So let's talk about that. What is an autoimmune disease?
Yes, I'd be happy to talk about that. And that's actually funny that you mentioned that, because I talked to a woman who is, one of the kind of leaders in this field, who started a national organization back in the 90s. And when she first started this organization, that's exactly what people thought it was. They thought autoimmune disease had to do with their car. And it doesn't. It has to do with the body. So, the immune system in the body is really there to protect the body internally. It looks for things that come in, viruses, bacteria, and whatnot that are foreign to the self, and tries to deal with them. So in an autoimmune disease, what's happening is that the immune system is recognizing some part of the body as foreign, and then creating inflammation and often damage to that part of the body. So it's that the body is attacking itself.
Can you name for us some, I know you can, will you name for us some autoimmune diseases that we might be familiar with, but we maybe didn't know that those were considered autoimmune diseases?
It's interesting because there's more and more being recognized all the time. I used to see the figure was around 80 autoimmune diseases, and then I started to see 100, and now it's really up about 130. And so there's more and more diseases being recognized all the time as autoimmune. So some of the more common ones, multiple sclerosis is probably one that a lot of people have heard of, and that's where the immune system is attacking the myelin sheath around the nerve cells. And Hashimoto's and Graves are both autoimmune diseases that affect the thyroid. Celiac, a lot of people are hearing about celiac these days, and that's actually an autoimmune disease. It's where the immune system is attacking the small villi in the small intestine. And some of the other common ones are rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, and ulcerative colitis, which both affect the intestines. Type 1 diabetes, also known as juvenile diabetes, is an autoimmune disease. And lupus, which is a systemic autoimmune disease, and psoriasis is a skin autoimmune disease. So those are some of the more kind of common ones.
Thanks for doing that. I think that puts a little framework around this so people can think it's not something that they haven't heard of. Well, before we get into the depths of all of this, if you don't mind, if you would share a little bit of your health journey with us, because that takes you to what you're doing today and why you're doing the podcast Autoimmune Adventures.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. I'd be happy to. Yeah, so my journey began very young, actually. I've had chronic illness almost my entire life. I was diagnosed with asthma when I was a year and a half old, and grew up with that, as well as a whole host of allergies. And I was diagnosed with the autoimmune disease about 12, 13 years ago. And, the interesting thing about all of those, that, asthma, allergies, and the autoimmune disease, is that they're all really similar in the sense that they're all kind of this hyperactive immune system. And, my history around that, medically was just, having asthma. I mean, can be a pretty serious disease, and going to the doctors, throughout my childhood, and also for allergies. I just became aware really early on of the limitation that the conventional medicine paradigm has for, these kinds of chronic illnesses. I mean, I heard pretty much the same thing around asthma that a lot of people find when they get an autoimmune disease and they go to the doctor. It's like there isn't any talk of actual healing. It's really just, okay, here's some drugs, and, you're going to have to manage this, and here's some ways to manage it. I just got frustrated with that pretty early in my life because it just didn't feel right to me. It's like, really? Like, this is just something going on that I can't heal from, and that's your perspective on it, and that's the best you can offer me. Along with that came, just all of the different drugs that they were giving me, which I more and more became aware, one, it would change every few years with kind of what the most current popular asthma medication was. And I began to wonder how much they really knew about the long-term effects of those, drugs on the body. I just, pretty early on became really disillusioned with conventional medicine and its approach to these kinds of systemic illnesses. And so I began looking at alternatives, and, eventually that led me, particularly after I got the autoimmune disease, where it was sort of like this, the sense of like, wow, I've already been interested in this for a long time, and now I'm getting yet another thing. So my, kind of sense of betrayal around getting yet another illness really led me on this journey that kind of eventually ended up including going through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and becoming a health coach, just out of my own personal journey of wanting to really continue to learn more about healing and health. Also my master's in consciousness studies was a huge part of that journey as well. So that's really been my journey, I'd say. We've all kind of taken on, I think, just because it's in our culture, these beliefs about disease and healing that aren't really very helpful.
So let's hop over to that question since you brought it up. So what does healing mean to you?
Well, the root of the word to heal is to make whole. When you look at that, it's like, okay, if you get a broken leg, then it kind of makes sense to be like, okay, so it's a broken leg, it's a physical thing, and so, to heal it is to make the leg whole again. But when you're talking about something that's more like a chronic illness, it's like, what does that really mean to make whole? And so to me, then you have to start looking at the fact that we're not just a body. It's like we're a body, we're a mind, we have emotions, if you want to go that far, then we're also a soul and a spirit. And so it's like, when you look at healing in that context, as you as an entire being, it's like, how can we make the entire being whole? With a chronic illness, often it is not just existing on a physical level. There's an imbalance in life in general, and that eventually kind of manifests as, a chronic illness. Mm-hmm. And so, you really look at how can an illness even be an opportunity to kind of walk this path of growing more whole as a human being, growing more whole and incorporating more of who you truly are into, yourself.
Right. And in that case, then, that the answer to that, what does healing mean to you, is really going to be different for every person because they're coming from different situations, different experiences, and what I may want to get out of life or what's important to me might not be important to someone else. And so I would think all of those aspects have to come together and be looked at on an individual basis.
Exactly. That's a really important point.
Now, do you work with folks individually, like coaching or counseling in any way?
As a health coach, that's exactly one of the things that I, work on people with is what is their healing journey for them and how do they really want to take back power over their own health and well-being instead of giving it over, kind of as we do in this culture, we tend to give our health over to a doctor or something when we get sick. But it's like, whether you're sick or not, it's like there's so many ways to take back your own power over your health and well-being. And as a health coach, that's really what I'm passionate about, is helping people do that.
So if our listeners are on their own health journey of whatever sort, they can feel free to contact you and you would work with them no matter where they live in the country?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I work with people, everywhere via Skype or phone or whatever. I'm, totally open to that.
Good. We'll get all of your information before we end. If anyone has any questions of you or needs help, they can. Let's go back to talking about autoimmune diseases specifically. How are they the same or different from other diseases?
Well, that's a great question. There's some ways that they are similar because inflammation is now being recognized as kind of this underlying mechanism to a lot of different diseases. I mean, you hear it being talked about cancer, with heart disease, kind of with a lot of the Western diseases as well as things like allergies and asthma. So one of the ways that autoimmunity is definitely similar is that inflammation is this underlying mechanism of what's going on. And another similarity is really just, a lot of the kind of underlying causes to a lot of these sort of Western modern diseases are things like lifestyle and diet, and like you mentioned before, toxicity. And so that's one of the other ways that it's really, similar. But, there's some key ways that I think it's really different. And one of those is obviously just what the definition of it, that it's this hyperactive kind of immune response, which is very different from something like cancer, where, in cancer, the cells are kind of dividing and the immune system isn't stopping it. So in this autoimmune diseases, the immune system is kind of attacking things that it shouldn't be attacking. Some of the other key differences are actually more in how we think about it, because when you look at something like cancer is recognized as a disease category. There's all these different types of cancers. They all have these, complicated names. But you still, it's recognized as a category of disease, and it's studied as such, and there's a medical profession. If you get cancer, you go to an oncologist, and autoimmunity still isn't. It's not recognized as a disease category, even though there is this common, underlying mechanism to all these different autoimmune diseases. The result of that is really unfortunate in that if you get an autoimmune disease, you're sent to the specialist for kind of the body part that's associated with your autoimmune disease instead of, a specialist for autoimmunity, which is, I think, my disease, which the autoimmune disease I have is called alopecia areata, which is where the immune system attacks the hair follicles. So, I was sent to a dermatologist. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, the problem isn't with my hair. The problem is with my immune system. I want to be sent to somebody who's a specialist in autoimmunity. And you can't go to a specialist for autoimmunity in this country because there isn't such a thing. If you go to a doctor and, you fill all that paperwork out when you first go to the doctor's office, and they'll often ask you things like, is there any history of cancer in your family? Is there any history of heart disease? And, that kind of thing in your family. And they don't ask about autoimmune disease. That would be a key question to ask because it does tend to run in families. And so it's like often a doctor won't even think about the possibility of it in terms of diagnosing it. I had a guest on my podcast who has multiple sclerosis, and the first doctor she went to took an MRI and showed that her brain told her that her brain looked like a 90-year-old person's brain. She was less than half that age. And it still she still didn't get a diagnosis. It still took 18 months and 2 more doctors before she was even able to get diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. But there are other approaches to, kind of treating these diseases, and those are, they go under various names. It's like alternative or functional or integral, complementary, integrative medicine, and that's really taking the approach of it's like kind of trying to treat the whole person rather than putting the human being, I like to say, putting the human being back in medicine instead of just, treating a body part.
And basically, it's not just applicable to autoimmune diseases, it's applicable to any facet of our health where we do need to look at these other approaches, even if the conventional seems to be working, because it is not just a one-sided piece of this puzzle. There's lots of components to who we are that makes up who we are.
Exactly. And, I don't want to throw out the good parts of conventional medicine either. It's like I do think there's a place for that, for that approach. But really, again, in terms of kind of health and wellness, but particularly when it comes to these, chronic systemic illnesses, there are just some really significant limitations to the paradigm that conventional medicine comes from. And so, yeah, you're right. The alternative approach really does make sense for a lot of different diseases, not just autoimmune disease.
Right. So basically what you're saying, especially the autoimmune patient, their patient experience with conventional medicine is probably going to stretch out for a longer period of time. Not necessarily all the time, but in many cases, that could be the tendency.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There was a study that was done that showed that basically, particularly with the more difficult autoimmune diseases to diagnose, it often took an average of 4 years and 4 different doctors for people to get a diagnosis. And then once they do get a diagnosis, it's like, well, sorry, you can't heal. You can't heal from this, and the best you can hope for is to manage the symptoms, and maybe you won't get any worse, and here's some drugs.
Sure, and that long wait time, think of how you can deteriorate in 4 years while you're wondering what's going on.
Exactly.
Now, you said taking back your power, and I think that's just a powerful little phrase. What do these illnesses tell us about taking back our power over our well-being?
Like I said before, these chronic illnesses often don't come on suddenly. They can kind of seem sudden, but I think that when they seem sudden, it's often because, we're kind of in the state that a lot of us are trained into in this culture, which is to ignore our body and certain aspects of our experience. I don't know if you have any experience with that. I know I do.
Yes, yeah, I think everyone does. Even if it's just a small thing, it's like, no, it couldn't be. I did that when I was about to give birth with my first daughter. I'm like, no, I'm not in labor. I'm like,
yeah, exactly. Recognizing after the fact that there were actually a number of signs earlier on that, something was really amiss, and there certainly were for me as well, and just kind of ignoring those signs and being like, oh, no, it's nothing. I'm just going to, keep working or keep burning the candle at both ends or whatever it is. I think they teach us the importance of really taking back our power, even when we're still well. I mean, it's not just when you're sick that you can take back your power. It's really important to take it back when you're well, and to really be aware of what's going on in your body, and to be, taking the steps that you can to be healthy, so that you don't get sick. And what I said earlier about giving up our power when we go into the doctor, because that was certainly my experience, and it's really tricky, especially when you don't feel well and you're going to the doctor, to not do this. And in that case, it's really important to kind of have an advocate, somebody who can kind of go with you. But the general kind of way of interacting with doctors, at least in my experience, was always sort of like, you hand your power over at the door. You walk in and it's like, they're the ones with all the knowledge, and so therefore everything that they say is truth with a capital T, and that you have to just accept everything that they say, and that's it. And there's more and more research coming out now about the placebo effect, which has such a bad rap in this country, but is actually a really important process, because it tells us the power of our own minds to heal. And the opposite is also the case. It's like there's the placebo effect, there's also the nocebo effect, which is the negative side of the placebo. So it's like if you go into the doctor and you're taking everything the doctor says as truth with a capital T, and the doctor says you can't heal, there's no chance of healing from this disease, and you're just going to have to hope to manage it at best, that can have a powerful effect if you take that as truth. And so it's like one of the things that I always really encourage people is just to be really aware when they're, if they're going to a doctor, to not give their power over, and that if they, if they hear one of those kind of negative limiting beliefs, coming at them from a doctor, to just be able to separate themselves at least a little bit from it, and be like, no, I don't accept that. I don't want to take that on as my own belief. And the other thing about it too is just seeing that, again, it's about this kind of power differential that we tend to interact with doctors around, putting them up on the pedestal. And the way I've started to think about it more and more, and it's still a little tricky for me, but the way I think about it is that, the doctor might have all of this expertise that I don't have, and they do. They've been, had a ton of training, they have a ton of knowledge that I don't have. But I'm the expert in my own body. Like, I'm the one living in my body. And so to me, it's kind of shifting that kind of doctor-patient, where the doctor's up on a pedestal relationship, to more of a partnership. It's like, I want to be in partnership with the healthcare people that I go to.
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful way to put it. You're walking in as equals. They have what they bring to the table. You have what you bring to the table. Neither one can do their job without each other. So it truly is a partnership.
It's like there's so many different ways that, we can take back the power over our health and well-being. And I tend to think about them as kind of these, like, how many points of power do we have in our life? And it's kind of expanding the, how we look at health and well-being, and all of the different things that impact our health and well-being, and understanding how many different things impact our health and well-being. And it can kind of get overwhelming, but it's really just looking at all of the different areas of your life, and how you can even make very small changes that can, over time really increase your well-being.
I can tell that we could have several conversations about this. There's just so much, there's so much that we can talk about, because this is a whole other topic, really, just the whole healing aspect of it, and the personalized side to all of it. But I'm sure you do a lot of that on your podcast, and you've got information like that on your website. Can you share that with us? Where can folks go if they want to find out more about you and what you do, and how can they contact you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So my podcast, which is called Autoimmune Adventures, as you said, is really focusing on, a lot of different aspects of healing, talking to a lot of different people, also really focusing on kind of the journey of transformation that, we can go on when we have the opportunity to go on when we are faced with something like a chronic illness. And you can find the podcast. It's actually on iTunes, so you can search for Autoimmune Adventures there. You can also go to the website, which is aiadventures.com. That's aiadventures.com. And my own website is juliestiles.com. And my last name is Stiles, so juliestiles.com. And you can contact me through either one of those websites. So.
All right, so we have aiadventures.com, and we have Julie Stiles, Stiles, juliestiles.com.
You know, the last thing I would just throw out to people would just be an invitation to really, look in your own life for what are three things that, I don't think I've ever asked this question to anybody and not had them be able to answer it. It's like, what are three things that you could do, that you could do starting today to improve your own health and wellness? And to just go ahead and take action even on one of those. It's like, just take a look at those and either commit to taking an action on one of them or find the support that you need to take action on one of them, and do it, because wellness and health really starts in the things that we do every moment of the day, and we can always make a new choice and choose something different to take back that power and to be healthy.
You are awesome. I am so happy that you found me and that we found each other and that we're able to share this very important topic. And I really do appreciate all that you do to help others. And please let me know how I or this radio show can be of service to you in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Pat. You have already. I just really appreciate you being willing to bring this message out. I think it's so important, to really raise awareness about autoimmune diseases and to really raise awareness about the importance of really taking back power over your health and well-being. So you've already been a huge help, and thank you so much.
Oh, well, it is my pleasure. We will have to have you back again. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Pat.